Today's episode is all about teen driving. We'll tell you about the cars that we learned to drive on back a long time ago when we were teenagers and the best new and used cars to buy your teenager today. Next on Talking Cars. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm Mike Monticello.
I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
I'm Mike Quincy.
It's the Mike, and Jen show. 'Cause that's not confusing to have two guys with the same name.
I'll just yell Mike. See who answers.
Somebody will answer.
Yeah.
So this episode is dedicated kind of like a back-to-school
Right.
episode. We're going to be talking about buying a car for a teen driver that might be going back to high school or going off to college with a car, new or used. So we want to talk about tips on which cars to look for, which small sedans, small SUVs, features that are good to look for in these cars, and also types of cars to avoid. And we're also going to deal with kind of a new way of thinking. We're going to get into that, a little controversial, that has to do with who should get the new car and who should get the older car in the family. So, but I wanted to actually start off with, let's go back in time to a much
Simpler?
a simpler era back when we were teenagers and first started driving.
So just a little bit back in
just
time.
like
Just
5-10
yesterday,
years.
yeah.
So Jen, let's start with you.
Okay.
What was the car that you learned how to drive in, and also what was the first car that you spent most of your teenage years driving?
Whoa, they couldn't be very, very much different. So my parents were a little ahead of their time in that they had their own graduated licensing program, in that we weren't allowed to get licenses till we were 17. They felt we would be a little more mature. Maybe not much.
Oh, that
So
would
was the
have
first
killed.
thing.
Mike and I were just talking about this the other day, how we couldn't wait.
You couldn't
When we
wait.
were 16,
It's a rite of
couldn't
passage,
wait
It was a rite of
to
passage.
get our driver's license.
So we were chomping at
So you had
the
to wait.
bit.
You had to wait another year.
I had to wait another year. And then they taught us, which I actually thank them for. Thank you, Mom and Dad. They made us learn on a 80s era Volkswagen Rabbit diesel manual.
So it had no power whatsoever.
No power, but it was a manual.
Right.
And I do appreciate,
Absolutely.
to this day, that's kind of a lost art of driving a manual transmission. So they made us learn on that, made us take our driver's test at the DMV in the manual. So that was always nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So that's what. Then their graduated licensing program ended because what we actually drove around in was a 1977 LTD2 panel side wagon. And there was no restrictions. And we took that car and we loaded it up with our friends and we drove it everywhere.
You
And
turned
we
it into an SUV.
we called it the Dragon Wagon in high school.
Now,
So
were your
just-
parents driving that too, or was it just the kids that were driving?
Yeah,
that?
we did not own the car. It was their car
Okay.
that we were using. I mean, you had to go and say, "Can I take the car? Can I use the keys?" There was no. At that time, kids didn't have their own cars. We just borrowed our parents' cars.
Right. Yeah. Same with me.
Yeah.
What about you, Mike?
Being the youngest in the family, my parents had to deal with 3 teenage drivers at one
gosh.
time, and we all learned to drive on a 1974 Chevrolet Vega, also
Nice.
with a manual transmission. Fast forward just a little bit, my brother and sister go off to college. I have 4 years in high school. Looking at me in the face wasn't that fun. And my dad then bought a 1980 Ford Fiesta. It was a demo from the dealer, and that's really the car that I drove throughout high school and then into college. And again, learning on a manual transmission back then, hot hatchbacks of the 1980s and stuff. That was kind of it wasn't as cool as a Volkswagen GTI.
Yeah.
but it was
Right.
a lot cheaper.
I wanted a Rabbit GTI.
Oh,
big time.
totally.
Yeah.
A lot of them still do.
Yeah, you know what's funny is that we all learned on manual transmissions. So the first car I ever drove was actually a 1982 Toyota Supra. That was my uncle's.
you
It was
are
my
cool.
uncle's
Great
car,
car.
and I was 14 in a parking lot, not on public roads, but 14. Thought I was going to be amazing. I stalled that thing many times. But the car I actually learned how to drive on was a 1983 Volvo 760 GLE turbo diesel, 4-speed manual with the push-button overdrive. Do you remember those?
Diesel was actually cheaper.
It was cheaper
Then-
and it got good fuel mileage, but it was also very easy to drive
Yeah.
because you basically, I'm sure it was the same thing with your Rabbit, you barely needed to give it any throttle whatsoever and it just took off the line. It has all that low-end torque.
Yep.
But what I remember was, I thought I'd been dreaming about driving since I can remember, and I'd always watched my parents, what they were doing with their shifting and how my dad would handle
Did you
curves.
shift from the passenger
Oh,
side?
yeah, heck
we
yeah.
did too.
Totally.
I thought it was going to be a breeze. And I get out, the first time I went driving, my dad took me out on our back roads in Mansfield, and I was struck by how narrow the lanes were. And I
Yeah.
thought this was going to be so easy. And I was struck by, wow, this is a little harder than I thought.
Right. Lane keeping's a big teen issue. They
Yeah.
tend to hug. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Hug
so
too close to
that
the
was
side.
the car that I learned how to drive on. But the car that I actually took off to college was a 1968 Volvo 145 wagon. This was our family car.
You had a dragon wagon too.
Yeah, this was our family car growing up. I mean, this is the car that we put all 5 of us plus the black lab and the cat and our homemade car top carrier. We took all our family vacations in this thing.
All the pigs and chickens.
Yeah.
that lived out in the
Just
country.
Brought the whole farm. And so when
They
I
moved
went
to Beverly. No, just
when I went to college, my mom had gotten a newer Volvo wagon, and she let me have that for a couple years while I was in college, and that was not cool at all, by the way.
No.
I mean, 4-speed manual again. Everything was a manual back then that we had.
Yep.
My family, you know, it's funny that I ended up at Consumer Reports because my family was very much, my dad and mom, very much about safety back then. They bought these Volvos. We also had a 1965 Volvo 544. That was the other car that I was driving when I was in high school, along with that 760 GLE, was my dad's Volvo 544.
Right.
Mel would say PV 544 to be exactly correct. Of course. also a manual transmission. But so it's just interesting. So my family bought these cars because Volvo was like the safest car
Right.
in the 60s, and now here I am at
They
Consumer
still
Reports,
carry
and
that
yeah,
reputation.
exactly. So it's just
And what's interesting about all of our family cars is that they were all rear-wheel drive.
Yeah.
And today you hear we get frequently asked questions all the time.
Yeah.
You know, what do you do with the cars after you're done testing them? I need a good car for my teenage driver, which of course we're going to get into. But it's I need all-wheel drive.
Right.
And somehow we all grew up in the Northeast, tons of snow, skiing in
have it.
Vermont. And somehow we survived with rear-wheel drive.
Before climate change, when it actually snowed. a
And
lot.
we did stuff with the cars that we aren't even allowed to do these days. You know,
Right.
like in that Volvo 145 wagon, if we had some friends over and we were going out to dinner, it'd be my mom and dad up front, the friends in the back seat, and then us 3 kids in the
Yeah,
way back in
in
the
the way
cargo
back.
area, no seat facing, you know, with the seats, our backs against the back of the seat, feet toward the back window. Went off to dinner that way. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't bad parenting. It was just the way you did it, right? I mean,
And you talk about graduated license and stuff we got away with back then. So my girlfriend in high school actually let me take one of their family cars, which was about a 1976 or 77 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser wagon. So I took my girlfriend and 2 other teenagers up to Vermont to go skiing for a weekend.
How much did you pay off for parents?
I
for
mean,
that?
but it's like they must have had a lot of faith in me because they had a 2-car family, and I took their primary family car. They had 2 other kids besides
with
that.
friends in the bad weather, right? Yeah.
I mean, today, forget
never.
it.
I was
mean,
gonna say, is it safe to say you would never let your daughter's boyfriend drive your car on
Yeah, that's pretty
on a
safe to
snowy
say.
Pretty
on a
much.
snowy
Safe to
snowy
say, yeah.
weekend
But I mean,
getaway?
when a
Right.
teenager gets their license, they're not allowed to have anyone in the car with them. More or less driving from Connecticut to Vermont to go skiing.
Right.
Yeah. Well, onto something a little more morbid than that.
little more fun than all
yeah,
those cars.
a little less
Little
fun
less fun,
is
yeah.
we're taping the show during the end of what's called the 100 Deadliest Days for teenage drivers,
Right.
and this is the time from Memorial Day to Labor Day when deadly teenage crashes go up exponentially during that time because the kids are off from school, they have a lot more free time, they're out driving more than they would be normally,
Yep.
and the deaths go way up. And I don't know if you have some information on that, why that is, or
Yeah. So again, there's teen driving is this whole balance of a number of things. So one is this risky behavior. They just don't have the judgment, and there's physiological reasons, even brain development, that they're not making good decisions. I mean, yeah. So recently in the state of Connecticut, there was just a tragic crash in which 8 boys were in a Chevy Cobalt. One of them passed away. Luckily, 7 survived. But you think of the choices that were made to make that decision to get in that car. So many things wrong. And these are the things that the graduated licensing programs are meant to address. But in this case, these boys are 18 and 19 years old, some of them. That all ends in most states around at age 18. All bets are off. Now you've got slightly more experienced, slightly more comfortable drivers, but they're still teenagers.
But still the data's there.
Right, and still the data's there.
teenagers make poor decisions, and
They do.
and they think they're invincible,
Yep.
and turns out they're not. We're not either.
Right, we're not either.
And so what are the things we're trying to accomplish here? Giving some advice on which vehicles are best suited to your teenage
Right.
driver.
And so that's what we want to talk about today. And we have a whole list of both suggested new cars for teens, suggested used cars for teens. On consumerreports.org, you can see that whole list.
Right.
But let's talk about some of the criteria. Jen, I know you're heavily involved in this. What are the criteria that, I guess, gets the cars on this list?
Right. So again, it's all about balance. So it's really kind of, I've said it before, it's kind of a Goldilocks thing. So first of all, we take only cars from our recommended vehicles. So the reliability's there. In general, they've done very well in our performance test. Now you add this not too fast, not too slow. We don't want the sports cars. We actually cut it off at acceleration 0 to 60 of 7.5 or quicker.
But we don't want anything slower than 11 because we don't want it so slow that they can't get out of the way.
Right,
of
that
something
they can't
need
merge.
to.
They're trying to get out into traffic. Again, their judgment's not good. You don't want the car to hinder them even more. Braking distances, we do look at our braking distances. We don't want dry braking distances greater than 145 feet. And then our emergency handling score. So this is a compilation of our avoidance maneuver, which is a kind of a diversionary tactic, our track handling. We're looking for cars that handle well. Again, their experience and judgment isn't there. They're going to be the ones that go into an exit ramp a little too quick. So we're trying to cut it off there too. And then on the used list, you'll see it start to be limited by year, looking for cars that have electronic stability control as standard equipment. Being a huge benefit.
Became standard as of 2012.
Right,
all
2012.
All cars had to have those.
But many others had it before then, so that's where you'll see the cars.
And the cool thing about if you can afford a new car, obviously one of the things you really want to look for if it's a teen driver is really anybody, but especially teen drivers, forward collision warning and automatic emergency braking are incredibly important.
Best case scenario, as you say, if you can afford it.
If you can afford it.
And the debate that we always hear is, well, the father or the mother says, I've got a new teenage driver, and we're just going to kind of get him a junker, and I've worked hard all my life, and so I'm going to treat myself to a new car. Maybe the kid will get the old car and stuff like that. And sometimes we give this advice, and it's a double-edged sword here, because not everyone can afford a brand new car for your teenage driver. But we always say, buy the most safety features that you can afford.
Right.
So in some ways, the inexperienced driver should be in the newest car with all the safety features, whereas a mom and dad have years and years of driving experience under their belt. Maybe they should drive the old car that doesn't have all the equipment.
Right.
And people look at us like we've got two
That's a new
heads.
way of
like,
thinking.
whoa,
That's a new way of
right.
thinking. I mean, I see both sides. I mean, look, you're a parent.
Because we all grew up driving the old car,
We
right?
grew up driving the old car, and the parents are potentially driving much longer distances than the kids. They're working really hard for their family. And you know what? Some cars are even status symbols. So they want to drive this fancy new car that they worked so hard for. But it's about the most unselfish thing you can do is to buy the new car and give it to your kid, and then keep driving that old car that you were gonna get rid of. Which I actually wouldn't. It would be nice if people would write in and let us know if they've done that. What they think about that. It's a stretch. It's a total stretch.
It's a stretch because they're probably much more likely to crash, and there's an insurance component too there that you don't necessarily want to couple your new driver with your new car.
Because it's going to be expensive already, and now you're putting the young driver in the car.
Right.
There's some other criteria too. I mean, we're talking. We normally suggest small to medium-sized sedans or hatchbacks, as well as small SUVs, small car-based SUVs. We tell people to stay away from 3-row SUVs because of the distraction of having too many people in the car, right? Is that
right? And so we leave off the minivans, we leave off the bigger SUVs off of our list.
Truck-based SUVs.
Not even just truck-based, anything that has a third row, we kind of leave off the list because I go back to this crash, this potential for every passenger that teen driver loads up the car with, their distraction goes up, their crash risk goes up.
Right.
So you don't want to create the Dragon Wagon party car that I had. You want to kind of limit that. The driving, the graduated licensing does that somewhat, but only to a point.
Right.
So we leave those off. And it brings up a really, again, a controversial balance for teen drivers is this idea that parents want to put their kids in the biggest mass vehicle they can find. And it's a balance between protecting them in the crash or avoiding the crash in the first place. So I do see teen drivers in big SUVs because they're saying physics-wise, they're going to be better off in a crash, but maybe not at avoiding it in the first place.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing. So, I mean, some people might think put the kid in a full-size pickup, right?
Right.
And that's
yeah.
a question you've gotten, I think.
Yeah, very common question.
And we live in a rather rural area out here, so a lot of people do have pickups, and they might think, okay, well, we'll just let the kid drive the pickup because there's mass involved. They're going to survive this crash. But, you know, if you look at the numbers comparing pickups to, you know, smaller cars, I mean, the point is, if you buy the kid a car, or if the kid gets a car instead of this pickup, there's a good chance they're going to avoid the crash instead of getting in. We want them to avoid the crash, not get in the crash.
Correct.
And so if you look at numbers of just say a full-size Chevy Silverado versus Chevy Cruze, the Silverado brakes in the dry 138 feet from 60 miles per hour. The Cruze only takes 125. And if you add in wet to the factor, it's 164 for the Silverado and 141 for the Cruze. So now you're talking over 20 feet.
Right.
You know, so that's significant.
A car length or a truck length
and then,
plus.
that can make the difference.
And then look at our avoidance maneuver exercise. 45.5 miles an hour for the Silverado, whereas the Cruze can do it in 56. So, I mean, that's a huge difference. Same thing if you look at a Ford F-150. 137 feet in the dry versus Ford Focus, 128 feet braking from 60 miles per hour. And then in our avoidance maneuver, F-150, 45.5 miles an hour, and the Focus, 51.5 miles an hour.
Yep.
So, I mean, the point is, mass is not always the answer.
Right.
And the answer is, let's keep the kids out of the crashes.
The best accident is the one you avoid.
Exactly.
But that advice went completely unheeded. 3 families in my town bought their kids pickup trucks.
Full-size pickup trucks, right? Which is what we're talking about.
and you know, again, we talk about physics. Higher center of gravity for a pickup truck, sloppier handling, it's less responsive, it's a big bulky creature that you don't want your inexperienced. But I get the cool factor. I mean, I get it. I love pickup trucks too. But boy, it is one of the worst decisions that the parents can make. And you talked about insurance costs before. You know, I want to get a Mustang, Dad. Well, how do you have any idea how much that's going to cost to insure your teenager in like a Mustang?
And that's one of the other criteria that we also suggest. Don't buy the kid a sporty car.
Right.
Don't even buy them a Miata. Anything like that. You're just asking something that's going to egg the kid on to drive even harder and faster than they should when they don't have the skills yet. You know, and that's the thing is they don't have the skills yet. I came up with some new cars that I thought were decent suggestions. Like to know what you guys think. Maybe you guys have a few choices as well. For new cars for teens, I like the Toyota Yaris IA because for under 18 grand, you get low-speed automatic emergency braking.
Right. It's one of
standard.
the least expensive cars where you can get that.
And what's cool is you get that in both, whether you get the manual transmission or the automatic. Sometimes if you get the manual transmission, you can't get it because they don't offer the automatic emergency braking on the base model, and the manual transmission usually comes on the base model. So in this case, you can get that. Honda Accord. What's interesting about that is you can get their Honda Sensing with the front crash prevention on even the base LX. You can't. A lot of cars you can't get the
newest
the most important.
You can't get the front
features.
collision features on the more base models.
I would qualify to the Accord 4-cylinder.
Exactly.
The 6
Yeah,
actually
correct.
gets pretty quick.
And that's
You
quite,
don't want
an
them in
engine.
that.
Yeah, that's
Right.
quite an engine. So we don't want them getting too eager.
Yep.
And also Toyota RAV4. And I kind of wanted to give a kind of a, you've got a small car, you've got a midsize sedan, and you've got a small SUV. Standard forward collision warning and automatic emergency braking.
And
on
you're
RAV4.
seeing those small SUVs creep onto our best cars for teen list because of ESC.
Right.
Well, and also
Now
because-
their handling is in a realm that
and
it's
they're
a
so
safe car.
ubiquitous. I mean, it's what everyone's buying. So.
Right. Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
so we talk about that, and we talk about, now you're looking, some of these cars, you're going to need to spend if you're buying a new car and you want those safety features, you're going to have to spend, $25,000. Some cars close to $30,000 because of where the packaging has those systems. But for $75, okay, you can
I know
send
that.
your car. You can for $75.
Get your car,
You can
yeah.
send.
You got to bring your teenage driver with him too.
You can send your car and your kid to a teen street survival school, and we host 2 of them a year here at Consumer Reports. And these are such cool schools because the kid brings the car that they're going to be driving or that they are driving. They come, they spend the whole day here. Some of us are instructors.
One-on-one instructors,
One-on-one.
I would add. Yep.
For the whole day. They
Yep.
get classroom instruction and instruction out on our track. And they do this all throughout the country, but we host it twice a year here. And some of us instruct. I know, Jen, you're heavily involved in the program as well. And what's interesting, I love seeing the kids because they come and you think, I often think teenagers are full of confidence, but they come here and they're nervous. You know,
Yes.
they don't know what to expect. They know they're not a great driver. Usually they know they're not a great driver. And it's so fun to see them throughout the day get more and more confidence,
Yep.
bigger and bigger smiles, and learn how to, go through a slalom with their car, learn how to do full ABS braking with their car. And
They
sometimes
may not have even felt ABS.
Well,
most of them haven't.
It's probably one of the most gratifying things that I've ever done at Consumer Reports is to become an instructor in this event, because they're normally not told, they're not encouraged to hit the brakes really hard,
Yeah.
make the tires screech,
Yeah.
push the car in the slalom so you can feel the edge, the handling limits of the tires.
Or feel it
Right.
break away.
They're
in
told
the
not
wet-
to drive
Do
like
you have any
this.
good stories? Like, what's the one thing that you teach? Like, what would be, if you could give somebody advice, what's the one thing you two dwell on as instructors? When you're in the-
As instructors, I tell them, I first let them get comfortable with whatever exercise they're doing. One of the ones is you drive down a straight line through cones, and then you have to make a quick turn to the right or left, and then stop in a certain box. And as they get comfortable with the maneuver, I say, go a little faster. Go a little faster.
Yeah, push
okay.
it a little bit.
And when you're doing the braking exercises, absolutely stand on that brake pedal. Push it down as hard as you can.
Because they usually haven't.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
you need to know what that feels
what
like.
What does it feel like?
Yeah, and so that actually leads into, I have about 4 things that I like to talk to them about right off the bat.
Okay,
And,
yep.
and the first one is driving position. Most people have no idea that they should be a lot closer to the steering wheel than they are. Really not so much the steering wheel, but they need to be able to fully reach the pedals. They need to be not in a comfortable position
Should
where
they
they're
be
way
way
back.
down like that?
They need to be, the seat needs to be up far enough that they can fully
Yeah.
press the brake pedal and fully press the gas pedal, because they may need to get out of a situation. So it's about sitting upright, being able to see things clearly, and some people think, oh, well, this doesn't feel comfortable, and then usually by the end of the day, they're like, oh, it feels comfortable. The other thing I teach them is hand position, 9 and 3
right.
all the time, not 12 and 12, or I've even
Not
seen people
crossed
drive
over.
like this.
Sorry.
You just put that anywhere.
Yeah, I know.
Or some people, you'll see them drive like this. I actually took a stunt driving school once where the guy did have us. We were sliding the cars around all over the place, and he did have us shuffle steer down
From the
here.
bottom, yeah.
But one of the problems with that is that I think it's easier to kind of lull you into not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
This just feels like a more, it's kickback position. You want it at 9 and 3. You want it 9 and 3 for a couple reasons. That's just the safest place. Also, you don't want the airbag
Right.
to hit your hands and knock you in the
Right.
face. So there's good reasons for that. Also, immediately eyes up. Both,
Yeah.
especially on our track exercises, but also out on the road. You always should be paying attention.
Look ahead.
And another big thing is check your mirrors. I check my mirrors every 10 to 15
Yeah, I'm
seconds.
a
No
scanner.
lie.
I scan, yeah.
You need to always, driving on the street is a full-time job.
Oh, yeah.
And you need to, it's not a time to be talking on the phone, whether it's hands-free or not. You need to pay attention. When you're talking on the phone, even if it's hands-free, you're not paying attention to
You
what
need to
you're
be
doing.
aware of everybody else as much as
Exactly.
yourself.
And when I
say this to my
started to
18-year-old.
learn to drive,
Yeah.
we go back to when we were teenagers.
Again, yeah, quit going there, Mike.
Seriously,
It was a good time.
for the first 6 months, I wouldn't turn on the radio in the car when I was driving because I
That's-
wanted to totally. And you know how much I love music.
This is why those parents trusted you.
Hey,
They
man.
knew Mike Quincy's a
why you
trustworthy
got-
I
guy.
can take your daughter in your station
Well, you
wagon
got
up
the
to
Vista
Vermont.
Cruise too.
But no, I mean, I wanted to really I wanted to be so good at driving that I thought the music was going to distract me. So I turned the radio off.
And there are still those kids
Which-
that are
which
really
again,
diligent.
This is so
Yep.
important to me, and it became important to my son, my 17-year-old. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is. He took the street survival course
Yep.
at Consumer Reports Test Track. He loved it so much, he volunteered for the next class just to go
help.
chase
Wow.
cones. And to help out in any way he can. So it's like, I turned him into a believer, and knock on metal table. He's so far had a good driving experience
I
and,
would add
no
too,
accidents.
courses like Street Survival or something similar do often give an insurance deduction, which is already high for these young drivers,
Right.
but they do give at least a tick off in terms of having a driving school.
And while we're talking about hosting the event at Consumer Reports Test Track in Connecticut, everyone should know that just Google Street Survival and
They're
find an
nationwide,
event in your area. Highly recommend it. It is really, really worth the time.
Yeah. Well, I hope that we gave everyone some good tips on teen driving and buying cars for teens. That's going to do it for this episode. If you want to learn more about the cars we talked about, click on the links in the show notes below. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.